You know, when you picture the highest echelons of global politics, there is this totally ingrained expectation of a perfectly choreographed stage play.
Oh, absolutely.
Like every single detail feels vetted by a team of consultants, and every optics decision is just meticulously focus grouped.
Right. Yeah.
You imagine a political leader stepping up to the podium, and standing right beside them is the perfectly matched, locally sourced spouse.
The ideal visual.
Exactly. They're there to, wave at the cameras, kiss the babies, and project this unified, flawless image of the homeland. It feels so predictable, scripted almost.
Well, it is entirely by design. I mean, traditionally, the political spouse is supposed to be the ultimate reflection of the nation.
Right.
We basically expect the leader's partner to be a living, breathing mirror of the electorate itself. Someone who understands the local culture implicitly because, well, they were born and raised in it.
But here is where it gets really interesting for you listening today. When you actually peek behind the curtain of modern history and look at who these world leaders actually fell in love with, that entire script just gets tossed right out the window.
It really does.
We are looking at a landscape of global political marriages that is, honestly, wilder, more complex, and frankly, more improbable than most Hollywood movies.
It absolutely shatters that illusion of the insular, perfectly choreographed political unit.
Yeah.
And the ripple effects of these cross-cultural marriages shape the history of these nations in ways we rarely ever talk about.
So welcome to today's deep dive. I am so thrilled to have you here with us because today we are on a mission to extract the incredible historical insights hidden within a truly fascinating document.
It's a great one.
We are pulling from a 20-question quiz document authored in January 2024 by Rajan Thambahali.
And we should note, this isn't just any trivia sheet.
No, definitely not. This comes to us from Qwizzeria. They are Switzerland's premier knowledge and quiz company.
Right.
And their underlying mission, which we are eagerly adopting for this deep dive, is to dig into the hidden layers of history through the lens of trivia. Today's mission is to unpack these specific questions to reveal something massive about how the world actually works.
The theme we are exploring today is foreign-born politician spouses. We're going to look at the intersection of, love, global migration, and high-stakes politics.
So fascinating.
Because what becomes very clear when you look at the Qwizzeria source material is that the partners of world leaders often have origin stories that are vastly more complex than the leaders themselves.
To really understand these international marriages, we have to start with the ultimate catalyst for global movement in the 20th century.
Right, the big disruptor.
Exactly. We have to start with conflict, wars, displacement, and exile. Okay, let's unpack this. Imagine being born in present-day Ukraine, winding up serving in the British Army during World War II, and then eventually becoming the three-time spouse of a prime minister.
Which is it's a huge trajectory.
And first lady from 2007 to 2011.
You're talking about Sonia Gelman.
Yes.
She married Shimon Peres of Israel. And the sheer geographic and historical sweep of her life before she ever stepped into an official residence is just staggering.
Totally.
But, she is just one piece of this puzzle.
Right, because then you have Leela Arulkar. Let's look at her trajectory. She is born in Ahmedabad, India.
Okay.
Her father is an Indian Jewish medical doctor, and not just a local practitioner, he was the personal physician to Mahatma Gandhi.
Wow. I mean, that proximity to history right from birth.
It's wild. She later moves to London, ends up working alongside George Orwell at the BBC World Service.
As you do.
Right, just casually working with Orwell. Then she meets her future husband, a man named Glafkos Clarides, who at the time is a prisoner of war in Nazi Germany.
Unbelievable.
He survives, and decades later becomes the president of Cyprus in 1974, and again from 1993 to 2003.
When you map out a life like that, it perfectly illustrates the sheer chaos of the mid-20th century. People were being displaced and colliding on a massive scale.
Yeah, colliding is the perfect word for it.
Take Margaret Binder, for instance. She was born to Swedish Jews who were fleeing the Nazi regime.
Right.
That displacement forced her to Vienna, where she eventually met a social democratic politician named Heinz Fischer. Decades later, from 2004 to 2016, she served as the First Lady of Austria.
And it isn't just a European phenomenon either. Look at Carmen Cudiello. She was Cuban, and she married Juan Bosch, a prominent writer and political figure from the Dominican Republic.
Right, Bosch was a major figure.
He was the opposition leader living in exile for over 25 years during the harsh regime of dictator Rafael Trujillo.
25 years in exile. Just think about that.
Exactly. When he finally became president in 1963, Carmen became first lady, though only for a brief 6-month tenure.
These aren't just interesting biographies. They represent a specific kind of political partnership forged in the crucible of trauma.
But wait, let me push back on that idea a little bit. I completely understand that meeting during a global conflict or a 25-year exile creates a profound personal bond.
Sure.
But politically, doesn't a trauma-bonded foreign-born spouse run a massive risk of alienating a public that just wants a, traditional homegrown figurehead?
You would think so.
How do they handle the glaring culture clash when they actually take office?
Well, that is the paradox.
Yeah.
You might think being a foreigner makes them fragile, but the shared trauma actually does the exact opposite.
Oh, really?
Yeah. If you have survived the Holocaust, or a prisoner of war camp, or a quarter century of living in hiding from a dictator, the standard everyday pressures of public office.
Like a bad poll number.
Exactly. A bad poll number, a hostile press, it probably looks very trivial in comparison.
That makes a lot of sense.
These spouses weren't just decorative background figures. They functioned as highly adaptable political anchors. They had already navigated the absolute worst the world could throw at them, which gave the leaders a private sounding board that was totally immune to ordinary political panic.
I hadn't thought of it that way at all. It's like they bring a battle-tested, grounded reality into the political bubble.
Exactly.
It gives the leader an anchor who isn't swayed by the daily noise.
But it is important to note that not all global political marriages start with that level of dramatic life or death stakes.
Right.
As the world stabilizes somewhat, we see a shift. Some of these partnerships start in beautifully mundane, almost completely everyday settings.
Right, the classic meet cute.
Exactly.
Imagine you are just going about your day. You work as a customer service representative at a Chase Manhattan Bank in New York.
A very normal day.
Right. That was the reality for Clara Duncan, a Jamaican-American businesswoman. She meets a man there, they marry in 1993, and fast forward to the present day.
Right.
She served as the First Lady of Liberia from 2018 to 2024, married to George Weah.
It is a phenomenal pivot.
True.
We see a similar leap with Anita van Lorsel. She was a Dutch-born artist working a highly demanding but very normal job as a flight attendant for KLM in Alitalia.
Oh, wow.
That everyday reality of flying commercial routes eventually leads to her marrying Paul Keating. He goes on to serve as the Australian Prime Minister from 1991 to 1997.
I have to pause here because I just marvel at the friction of that transition. It is not just a change of address. It is a complete identity shift.
Oh, completely.
One day you were walking down the aisle of an airplane checking seatbelts or sitting at a desk at a bank branch, and the next you were living in a political fishbowl, navigating state dinners and international diplomacy.
It's a huge leap.
But wait, didn't one of the spouses in our source material actually take over the fishbowl entirely?
Yes. And this brings us to perhaps the most fascinating mechanism of assimilation in our deep dive. Let's look at Janet Rosenberg.
Okay.
She was born in Chicago, a typical American college student studying at Northwestern University. She meets a dentistry student there named Chetty Jadding.
It's just a normal college romance.
Exactly. They marry, move to his home country of Guyana, and she eventually becomes the First Lady from 1992 to 1997.
Which is already an incredible leap. A Chicago native moving to a South American nation and becoming First Lady is a huge story on its own.
But she didn't stop there.
Right.
Not even close.
Right.
Janet Rosenberg Jagan later served as Guyana's 6th prime minister, its first vice president, and ultimately she was elected as the nation's 6th president.
Okay, we need to really look at how that actually works.
Yeah.
How does a woman born in Chicago convince the Guyanese electorate to make her their head of state?
It's wild.
That defies every traditional rule of local politics.
It comes down to the depth of immersion. She didn't just fly in and wave from a balcony.
Right.
She spent decades doing grueling grassroots political work alongside her husband in Guyana. I mean, she was jailed for her political activism there.
Oh, wow.
Over time, that proximity to power, combined with her undeniable physical commitment to her adopted country's struggles, it just completely eroded the outsider label.
So she proved herself.
Exactly. She transitioned from a foreign spouse to a foundational pillar of the nation's political identity.
That is a brilliant transition into our next theme, because when you talk about being a foundational pillar, you see a fascinating pattern during the decolonization era.
Yes, you do.
These spouses aren't just joining an established government machinery, they're acting almost like the co-founders of a massive startup, helping to build entire countries from the ground up.
That startup analogy is very apt, and the environments they were operating in were incredibly fragile and high stakes.
Let's talk about Kirsty Sword. She is an Australian-born activist. She's working on improving women's lives in her adopted region, and she meets her future husband, Zana Gusmal, while he is serving a 20-year sentence in Jakarta's Sipinang prison.
Talk about high stakes.
Yay. He survives his imprisonment and goes on to become the president of Timor-Leste from 2002 to 2007, and later returned as prime minister in July 2023.
Visiting a political prisoner in Jakarta, and eventually becoming the first lady of a newly independent nation. It shows a profound level of ideological commitment long before any actual power was achieved.
But let's do a little thought experiment here. Put yourself in the shoes of a local citizen in a country fighting for independence, like Timor-Leste or Botswana.
Okay.
Your leader brings home a foreign spouse. Take Ruth Williams Kama, for example.
A classic example.
She was the daughter of a British army captain serving in India. She marries Sir Seretse Khama, the premier chief of the Bamangwato tribe, who becomes the inaugural president of Botswana.
Right.
She was first lady from 1966 to 1980, and their son actually went on to serve as the country's fourth president from 2008 to 2018.
Incredible legacy.
But if you are a voter in 1960s Botswana, your new leader is married to a woman from the very empire that previously controlled your region. Why wouldn't that completely destroy his political credibility?
It's a very valid question.
Yep.
To understand why it didn't, you have to look at the concept of external legitimacy.
Okay, what does that mean?
Think of a foreign-born spouse in a newly independent nation, almost like a corporate external auditor.
Interesting.
They aren't entangled in local tribal rivalries, historical grudges, or regional biases. Because of that, they can operate with a unique kind of neutrality.
Ah, I see.
Furthermore, they bring invaluable international sympathy. When a new nation is trying to establish a constitution, like we saw with Regina Abel, the first lady of Ethiopia from 1995 to 2001.
Married to President Negasso Gidada, right?
Exactly. Or fighting for recognition like Errol Barrow in Barbados, whose American-born wife Carolyn Plaskett stood by him. The foreign spouse acts as a bridge.
Okay.
They become living, breathing symbols to the global community that this new nation is modern, interconnected, and ready to engage with the world.
So they are effectively a human diplomatic channel.
Exactly.
That makes so much sense. But as any founder knows, the startup phase eventually ends, and what replaces it is the harsh, volatile, and often ruthless reality of entrenched political power.
And that transition from building a nation to desperately holding on to power can be incredibly chaotic for a foreign-born spouse.
Let's look at the facts from the source material because the history gets very complex here. We want to just report the facts neutrally as they are laid out.
Right.
Sylvia Valentin assumed the role of First Lady of Gabon in 2009. Her tenure came to a very sudden, abrupt end when her husband, Ali Bongo Ondimba, was deposed on August 30th, 2023, after 14 years of rule.
A sudden shift in power.
And what's interesting is that her mother-in-law had served in that exact same First Lady role right before her, from 1989 to 2009.
We see similarly entrenched complex dynamics in Zimbabwe.
Right.
You have two First Ladies. Sally, who was born in modern-day Ghana and served from 1987 to 1992, and Grace, who was born in South Africa and served from 1996 to 2017. Both were married to the same person, Robert Mugabe, over the course of his extensive rule.
And then there is the sheer political whiplash of Ecuador.
Oh, Ecuador is fascinating.
Corina del Peral Duran, an Argentine poet and composer, served 4 distinct terms as First Lady.
4 terms.
Her husband, Jose Maria Velasco Ibarra, was a 5-time president of Ecuador. But out of those 5 terms, he only managed to complete 1 full term, from 1952 to 1956.
It wasn't just political instability that these spouses had to navigate. Sometimes personal instability played out on the world stage, too.
Yeah, that happens a lot.
Ritt Hansen, born in Norway, married a German in 1948, who would later become Chancellor, Willy Brandt.
The document mentions his chancellor years as 1948 to 1980.
Right, covering that entire era. But their marriage lasted until 1980. Ending in divorce in 1979 when she discovered his affair with Brigitte Seebacher, who eventually became his 3rd wife.
Let's pause and look at the mechanics of this chaos. We tend to romanticize the title of First Lady. We picture glamorous state dinners and diplomatic immunity.
Right? The fairy tale.
But when you look at Ecuador's 5 interrupted terms or a sudden military deposition in Gabon, I have to ask, does being a foreign-born spouse transform into a massive political liability when things start going south?
When we impartially synthesize these historical events, a distinct psychological pattern emerges. It's the scapegoat mechanism.
The scapegoat mechanism.
Yeah. Being an outsider is a double-edged sword. When a leader is popular and the economy is booming, the foreign spouse is celebrated as a symbol of cosmopolitanism and global reach.
Like we talked about with external legitimacy.
Exactly. But the moment the political tide turns, when there is an economic crisis or a coup, that same spouse is incredibly vulnerable.
Oh, I see where this is going.
They are easily framed by political opponents as an interloper, an outsider draining the country's resources, or a symbol of the regime's disconnect from the everyday citizen. Their foreignness, which was once an asset, is weaponized against them.
It's the ultimate paradox. The exact characteristic that made them unique and valuable becomes the very thing they are attacked for.
Exactly.
Now, as we move through this historical timeline, let's bring it up to the modern era. Because in the 21st century, the dynamics of these cross-cultural political marriages are shifting fundamentally,
They really are.
especially regarding traditional gender dynamics and geographic trends.
The traditional mid-20th century expectation of the male leader and the supportive female foreign-born spouse is being completely upended.
Absolutely. Take Chris Stone. He was an Aussie rules footballer who played for St. Kilda in the Victorian Football League.
A totally different background than what we've been discussing.
Completely. He ends up married to Sophie Wilmès, who became the first female prime minister of Belgium, serving from 2019 to 2020.
We see this role reversal again with Stephen Kinnock. He is a British member of Parliament, coming from a very well-known family of UK politicians.
Right.
He married Helle Thorning-Schmidt, who made history as Denmark's first female prime minister from 2011 to 2015.
And it is not just Europe experiencing this modern shift.
No, it's global.
Rula Ghani, born in Lebanon, was named one of Time's most influential people in 2015, a year after her husband, Ashraf Ghani, became president of Afghanistan. She served as First Lady until 2021.
Right.
And looking to North America, Mila Pivnici was born in Sarajevo, moved to Canada as a 2-year-old when her father took a research fellowship in Montreal.
A completely different migration story.
Right. Her husband, Brian Mulroney, eventually became the 18th Prime Minister of Canada, serving from 1984 to 1993.
There's also a fascinating, highly concentrated regional trend in Costa Rica that illustrates this modern interconnectedness perfectly.
Yes. Costa Rica had consecutive presidents from 2010 to 2018. Laura Chinchilla served from 2010 to 2014, followed by Luis Guillermo Solis from 2014 to 2018.
And they share a unique connection.
Both of them married Spaniards, Jose Maria Rico and Mercedes Peñas Domingo, respectively. So, what is the underlying logic here?
No?
When you look at an Aussie rules footballer in Belgium, a British MP in Denmark, or back-to-back Spanish spouses in Costa Rica, are we seeing a reality where global mobility is so high that marrying someone from another country is just becoming a standard, unremarkable feature of modern democracies?
That is exactly what the data suggests. Modern political spouses, whether we're talking about Kinnock in Denmark or Ghani in Afghanistan, are often prominent global figures, academics, or politicians in their own right long before their partners take office.
Right, they have their own platforms.
This reflects a world where leadership itself is increasingly cosmopolitan and transnational. The rigid barriers of distance and culture that used to define national politics are simply eroding.
It's a massive shift.
We're moving far away from that insular focus group model we talked about at the beginning toward a reality where global mobility is just an accepted, expected part of a modern leader's profile.
It really highlights how interconnected we've become. The political stage is no longer just a local theater, it's a global network.
Which leaves us with a provocative thought for you to mull over after we wrap up today.
I love these. Let's hear it.
If global mobility and transnational marriages continue to rise at this current pace, will we eventually reach a point in the near future where having a strictly native-born first spouse is actually the exception rather than the rule?
Oh, wow.
And if that happens, how will that reshape our historically rigid ideas of national identity? If the person representing the symbolic heart of the nation alongside the leader wasn't born there, What does it actually mean to belong to that nation?
Oh, that is a brilliant question to leave you with today. How much does origin really matter when the world is this hyper-connected?
Exactly.
We want to thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into history, politics, and the incredibly complex world of international romance. We've really just scratched the surface of the amazing insights contained in these sources.
There is so much more to explore.
If you want to engage with more brilliant, thought-provoking content exactly like this, I highly urge you to visit Qwizzeria.com.
It's a fantastic resource.
And please support the incredible Qwizzeria project by becoming a member on Patreon. Their dedication to extracting knowledge and exploring the world through trivia is the entire reason we were able to bring you this deep dive today.
It has been a genuine pleasure to synthesize these historical threads with you.
Next time you see a political leader standing on a stage, waving to the crowd with their spouse by their side, remember, you aren't just looking at a perfectly choreographed, locally sourced stage play.
Not at all.
You might just be looking at a former Aussie Rules footballer, a bank representative, or someone who might just end up being the future president. Keep diving deep, and we will see you next time.